This is part 11 of our Learn Lightroom 5 video series, and in this episode I'm just going to answer some of the common questions I've received about the Lightroom videos. Before I do that though, if you guys could go down below this video and click the subscribe button and comment in the videos and like the videos, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, let's get started. First question. Often you'll hear me say that I expose this photo for the highlights. What do I mean by that? This goes back to the olden days when we used film. With film, there were broadly two different types. There was slide film, which is a positive film, and there was a negative film. Most people used the negative film. And the way the chemistry of the film was, with negative film, anything that was in the shadows would tend to lose detail faster than anything that was in the highlights. So what you would do if you were shooting negative film, you would expose for the shadows. So you would overexpose your shot slightly so that anything in the shadows did not lose its detail, because then in the printing process, when you went to make the print, you retain that detail throughout until you hit the final photograph. When you shot with slides or positive film, you would do the opposite. You would expose for the highlights, which means you would underexpose slightly. And the reason why you did that is so that you would retain detail in the highlights. That way, if when you printed anything from a slide, you would be able to express that detail in the final print. We're shooting digital now, and digital is a positive rendering, similar to shooting slides. So you're going to expose for the highlights. If this happens mostly if you have a real bright area in the photograph like this. If I had shot this and exposed for David, this is a statue of David, all this sky area would have been pretty blown out, and when it would have been blown out such that I would not have been able to recapture any of the detail using Lightroom. But I exposed for the highlights, which means I underexposed this shot. Underexposing the shot, of course, made David out to be a silhouette. But with Lightroom, I was able to bring out the detail in David. Conversely, if I had exposed for David, let me say this again, I would not have been able to get any of this detail back from the sky. It would have been gone. So I exposed for the highlights by underexposing. I would suggest when you take a shot and you have a lot of bright area like this, is you take one at the normal exposure, you take one stop underexposed, then 2 stops underexposed, 3 stops underexposed. Bring them into Lightroom and see what you could do with them. So that's why I say usually I expose for the highlights, and I usually do. Can you blur out the background using Lightroom? The short answer is no. Not like you can if you use a regular, any everyday lens and you shoot wide open. You could blur the background out a lot more effectively than you can with any software, and that includes Photoshop. Photoshop is better than Lightroom though. What you can do in Lightroom is you could use this tool, the second one from the right, that's the radial filter, and reset the filter by holding the Alt key and clicking on reset. It resets these sliders. We're going to draw the filter out on this little statue's face here. And I'm going to reposition it so it's more over his face. And what you could do is, with the radial filter, make sure that the invert mask is not clicked. And you're going to want to turn clarity all the way down. When you turn clarity all the way down, it blurred the background slightly. You could turn sharpness all the way down. You could add noise. You could do something with these other sliders, which I don't see them doing anything. But that's pretty much the closest you could get to blurring out the background with Lightroom. Let me show you the before and after. I click this little switch here. There's before and there's after. Now, you can stack this filter and add another one on top, but what I found when you do that is there's so much processing power it needs. Depending on your computer, it will go real slow and it will get herky and jerky and stuff. So really the answer is no. Try to, if you're shooting a subject and you want the background blurred out, just shoot at the widest aperture you can. That's a lot more effective than trying to get it in post-processing. Next question. Using the backslash key doesn't show the original version of my image. What they're referring to is many times in these videos as I've developed the photograph, I would hit the backslash key and you would see the original untouched image, and then I'd hit the backslash key again and it would show the processed image, and that way you could see the comparison of what I did to it. Now first of all, there's two things you got to keep in mind. First is the backslash key. When you do this, it only works when you're in the develop module. If you're in the library module, or any other module for that matter, it won't work. You have to be in the develop module. The other thing is, this is a backslash key. There are two keys that are slashes on your keyboard. One is /, one is backslash, and the / obviously will go the other way. So make sure you're hitting the backslash key. One thing I became aware of is not all keyboards have the backslash key. Somebody emailed me from Quebec, and they have a French keyboard, and the French keyboard, at least their French keyboard, did not have a backslash key. So whatever country you're in, perhaps your keyboard doesn't have a backslash key. In that case, I don't know what the key is to use. And what we're talking about to show you, this is a process photo I did in one of the episodes. If I hit the backslash key, it'll show the original version. This is coming into Lightroom. Hit the backslash key again, and that's the process version. That's so you could see what you did. If you don't have a backslash key, what you can do is hit the Y key. And the Y key will show a side-by-side view of the original shot and the process shot. Hit the Y key again, and you're back to the process shot. So if you don't have a backslash key, hit the Y key. And make sure you're in the develop module too. The Y key only works in the develop module, just like the backslash key. Okay, why do I usually shoot my landscapes at f11 and not f22 for maximum depth of field? That's true. f22 will give me more depth of field than f11. But what happens when you close down the aperture so much to such a small pinhole that f22 is, the light becomes what they call diffracted, and it will actually distort the image going through that tiny hole of the aperture. So usually you don't want to shoot with your aperture closed all the way down when you want to get maximum detail in the shot. So what you're doing is you're trying to find a happy medium, something that's going to give you good enough depth of field but going to give you really clear, crisp pixels when you shoot. Usually on most lenses, the most sharpest image is obtained when you're 2 to 4 stops shut down from maximum. Meaning, let's say you had a lens and it was f2.8. 1 stop down is f4. 2 stops down is f6. f5.6. 3 stops down is f8, and 4 stops down is f11. So anywhere between f5.6 and f11 that's 2 to 4 stops down from wide open. That's going to be where that lens is going to be at its sharpest. Every lens is different though. So what you want to do is do some experimentations with your lens. What I found is with the Nikon lens that I use for my landscapes, that f11 is real sharp. So I usually shoot at f11. Now here is a shot here of a landscape. And this was shot at f11. I hit the I key on my keyboard twice and it will come up. I shot it at 1/125th of a second, f11. Now I was at 24 millimeters, which gives you a little more depth of field also, shooting more with a wider angle. But as you can see, these flowers are in decent focus, and so is the rest of the photograph. All the trees in the background, the grasses in the front here, and the water itself are pretty well focused. So yes, if I used f22, these flowers probably would have been a little better focus, but this is good enough. And it's at f22, the picture would have lost some clarity and detail in the finer part of the image because of diffraction. So I shoot at f11. So you do some experimenting with your lenses. Go 2 to 4 stops closed, I mean down from wide open. So whatever you're wide open, if you're shooting, maybe your lens is f4.5 is wide open, then you're going to want to go 2 stops further down would be f11, then a little further. You don't want to go all the way down to f22 though, or some lenses go down to f32 even. You don't want to do that. Generally speaking, it's gonna you won't get as crisp an image. Do I always push the highlights to -11 and the shadows to +100? The answer is, on landscapes, I always do that at the beginning. That's the first thing I do on landscapes. Once I start processing the landscape further though, and I set the white and black point, and maybe I had to adjust exposure, I added clarity, and then I added some contrast, I might notice that my whites or the stuff in the brighter part of the picture maybe are too subdued. I want them a little brighter, so then I'd bring highlights up a little bit. Or I might see that the shadows are just too bright, so I'll bring shadows down a little bit. So on landscapes, I always do it at the beginning, and then I might adjust it later on, readjust it later on. For if I'm shooting a portrait, I almost never touch the highlights and shadows at all, because hopefully I did exposure perfect in camera for a portrait, so I won't touch them at all. If it's an environmental portrait, meaning that's a picture of a person in the environment, maybe a picture of a golfer on a golf course, it's a portrait of a golfer, I might mess with the highlights and shadows a little. I won't bring them down to -100, +100 though. I just to make sure that the golf course in this instance is exposed properly. So I might mess around with them a little, but it's more by eye then. I'm not doing it like I do a normal landscape. Hope that answered your question, but that's the way I do it. Everyone's got to do it, come up to your own way. This gives me a good starting point on landscapes, doing it that way. On my copy of Lightroom in the Develop module, the panels on the right all stay open. On yours, they close as you open another. How? What they're referring to is this right-hand panel. As you notice now, I have the basic panel open. If I open Tone Curve, the basic panel closed and Tone Curved open. If I open, let's say, Detail, Detail opened, and the other panels will all stay closed. Well, how that is, that's just a setting in Lightroom. If you right-click on any of these panels, it's called Go in Solo Mode. I'm going to turn Solo Mode off. And I'm going to open the basic panel, then I'm going to open Tone Curve. You see how they're all staying open now? HSL, Detail, I can split toning. I mean, to me, this is a pain in the butt, because what if I went up and I had to do something, I just did some lens corrections, and I decide that my shadows are too bright and I want to turn shadows down. I have to like scroll up to get it. So that's why I prefer doing it in what they call solo mode. So just right click on any of these panels and turn on solo mode, and that way whatever you open will be the only panel open. All the rest will close. And that's it. That's all the common questions that I've got. And if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to email me. And my email address is on the screen. It's tony@anthonymorganti.com. And if you want to post a comment, ask a question in the comment section under the videos, do that. I'll be glad to answer right there. It might take me a while to find it, to see it, so it might take me a day or so to see that, but I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. So just send me off an email or post it in the comments. Until our next video, I hope you guys are doing well and taking a lot of great shots, and I hope these videos help. And again, if you guys could subscribe to my channel and like and comment in the videos, I'd really appreciate it.